Elena Vasquez had been cleaning rooms at the Hargrove Tower for 3 years, and in all that time, she had never once touched anything that wasn't hers to touch. So when she knocked on the door of the 42nd floor penthouse suite and heard nothing, she did what she always did. She entered quietly, changed the linens, restocked the bar cart, and kept her eyes forward. But that morning, something on the mahogany desk stopped her cold. A contract, a thick one, and a single name at the bottom of the signature page that she recognized immediately. What she did next would change everything, not just for her, but for the man whose name was on that line. Before we continue, if you're new here, please like and subscribe, and drop a comment letting us know where in the world you're watching from. It means more than you know. Elena was 29 years old, the daughter of a retired civil engineer and a seamstress, and she worked the early morning shift at the Hargrove Tower because the hours left her afternoons free to study. She was 2 semesters from finishing her degree in corporate finance at the City State University. Not the kind of details she volunteered to guests, and not the kind of thing anyone thought to ask a woman pushing the linen cart. She paid her own tuition, helped her younger brother with his rent after he lost his job, and still managed to send something home to her mother every month. Nobody handed Elena anything. She had built her life like a careful, deliberate structure, one precise decision at a time. The penthouse suite on 42 was reserved that week for Marcus Holt, the founder of a private equity group whose name appeared regularly in financial publications. Holt was the kind of man who wore his wealth like armor, custom suits, a watch that cost more than a sedan, and a manner of speaking that made every room feel slightly smaller. He was 51, sharp, and accustomed to getting exactly what he wanted before he had to ask twice. His assistant, a young man named Daniel, trailed him almost everywhere, nodding at the right moments and laughing at the right volume. That morning, Holt was downstairs in the hotel restaurant closing a breakfast meeting. The contract on his desk was a merger agreement between his firm and a smaller logistics company called Prentice Freight. Elena had set her cleaning caddy on the floor near the desk and was reaching to straighten a vase of flowers when her eyes caught the name printed beneath the signature line. Prentice Freight. Then she saw something else, a clause, partially visible on the open page, that referenced an arbitration freeze period. Her hand paused above the vase. She had studied that exact clause structure in her business law course the previous semester. The specific language, the way it was buried in subsection 11, referencing a regulatory review that would lock Prentice's accounts for up to 18 months, was not a standard protection clause. It was a trap. If the owner of Prentice Freight signed this document, he would be unable to access his company's operating funds during the entire review window. He would default on his fleet payments. The company would collapse from the inside, and Holt's group could absorb the assets at a fraction of their value. Elena straightened the vase, finished her work, and left the suite. But she didn't stop thinking. She looked up the name on the contract. Prentice Freight was owned by a man named Gerald Osei, a first-generation immigrant who had spent 20 years building his trucking company from 2 vehicles to a regional fleet of 60. His deal with Holt was scheduled to close that afternoon in the hotel's executive conference room on the 38th floor. Elena knew the hotel's layout well. She also knew that the conference room required a housekeeping clearance walkthrough before any major event, and that walkthrough was on her assignment list for 11 o'clock. She arrived with her cart at 10:58. The room was already being arranged by hotel staff. Daniel, Holt's assistant, was at the far end reviewing documents. Elena moved through the space efficiently, checking windows, restocking the side credenza, wiping down the serving counter. She worked quietly, the way she always did. At 5 minutes past 11, as she was preparing to leave, Marcus Holt walked in early with 2 members of his legal team. He glanced at her the way powerful men sometimes glance at service workers, briefly, without focus, as if she were part of the furniture. Then he looked again. Something about her stillness, perhaps, or the fact that she hadn't immediately moved toward the exit. "We need the room," he said. "Yes, sir," Elena said. "I just need to log the clearance." "You can do that from the hallway." She nodded and began moving her cart, but as she reached the door, she turned. Mr. Holt, she said quietly, I apologize if this isn't my place, but I think Mr. Osei should have an independent attorney look at subsection 11 before he signs anything today. The room went still. Holt's expression didn't change immediately. He was too controlled for that, but something shifted behind his eyes. Excuse me. The arbitration freeze clause, Elena said. Her voice was level. The regulatory review window it references would lock his operating accounts. I don't think he's been told that. One of the attorneys actually turned to look at her directly. Daniel, across the room, slowly set down his folder. Holt smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. I'm not sure you understand what you're reading, or why a housekeeper would be reading our contracts. I wasn't reading your contract, Elena said. It was open on your desk. I noticed the clause while I was cleaning. That's a serious accusation, Holt said, his voice dropping. And frankly, it sounds like something you rehearsed. He looked toward the hotel manager, who had appeared at the doorway drawn by the rising tension. I'd like this woman removed from my event, and I'd like to speak with her supervisor about why a member of your cleaning staff is commenting on private legal documents. The hotel manager, a man named Patrick, stepped forward with the strained expression of someone trapped between two forces he didn't want to offend. He looked at Elena. Elena, perhaps you should. I'd also like to file a report, Holt continued smoothly, about a confidentiality concern. This woman had access to a private suite. If she reviewed our documents, that's a liability issue for the hotel. The room tilted. Elena could feel the shift, the way authority bends when enough pressure is applied to it. Patrick looked genuinely uncomfortable. One of Holt's attorneys was already writing something on a notepad. Elena didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She reached into the pocket of her uniform and produced her small laminated employee card, which she held toward Patrick. I did my job, she said. The clearance log will show my entry and exit times. The suite's keycard record will match. I didn't stay longer than my assignment. Patrick nodded slowly. Yes, we can pull those records. Please do, Elena said, and then she waited. What happened next took 12 minutes. Patrick stepped into the hallway to make a call. Holt spoke in low tones to his legal team. Daniel stood near the window, no longer moving. The silence in the room had texture. When Patrick returned, he was accompanied by the hotel's head of security and a woman Elena had seen only twice before, Dr. Renata Sims, the hotel's corporate liaison, who also happened to sit on the board of the city's Small Business Lending Authority. She had been in the hotel that morning for an unrelated meeting. Patrick had reached her because she was the fastest senior authority he could find. Dr. Sims looked at Holt. Then she looked at Elena. Can you walk me through what you saw? She said to Elena. The contract was open to the signature page, Elena said. Subsection 11 references regulatory review under a framework that's typically used for distressed asset transfers, not standard mergers. The freeze period is 18 months. If Mr. Osei signs today, he won't be able to access his operating accounts until the review concludes, and a company his size can't survive that without defaulting. Dr. Sims was quiet for a moment. Then she looked at Holt's lead attorney. Is that an accurate description of the clause? The attorney didn't answer immediately. That pause was its own kind of answer. Gerald Osei arrived at 11:45, 15 minutes before the scheduled signing. He was a compact, serious man with close-cropped gray at his temples. He shook hands, accepted coffee, and then noticed the mood of the room, the tension that had settled into the furniture. The way Holt was standing slightly apart from his own team. He looked at Dr. Sims, whom he recognized from a lending board event. Renata, he said, what's going on? She told him, briefly, clearly, without editorializing. Osei read subsection 11 himself. He read it twice. Then he set the contract down on the conference table and looked at Marcus, Holt, without saying a word. The look lasted a long time. Holt began to offer an explanation. Something about standard protective language, about his team's standard process, about a misunderstanding. But his lead attorney had gone quiet, and Daniel had stepped away from the window and was looking at the floor, and the explanation dissolved in the air before it finished forming. Osei did not sign. He thanked Dr. Sims, shook Patrick's hand, and paused at the door. He looked at Elena. "What's your name?" he said. "Elena Vasquez." He nodded slowly. "Thank you, Ms. Vasquez." She nodded back. Marcus Holt left the hotel within the hour. Within 2 weeks, a business journalist published a piece examining a pattern of similar arbitration clauses in 3 previous Holt Group acquisitions, all involving small companies, all resulting in rapid asset collapses. The piece cited anonymous sources close to the deals. The firm's largest institutional partner quietly suspended new commitments pending a review. Elena finished her shift that day, logged her timesheet, and took the bus to her afternoon class. She didn't tell anyone at school what had happened. It wasn't the kind of thing she talked about. Gerald Osei, however, did talk about it. He contacted the university 2 months later looking for Elena, and eventually reached her department's academic advisor. He wasn't offering charity. He was offering a 6-month paid internship at Prentice Freight, real work, contract analysis, vendor negotiations, with the understanding that it would become a full-time offer upon her graduation if she wanted it. He had done his research. He knew her GPA. He knew her program. He told the advisor, simply, that he was looking for someone with good judgment. Elena accepted. There's a version of this story where no one listens to her, where her warning gets swallowed by the weight of money and status, and the instinct of institutions to protect the comfortable over the correct. That version exists too, in other rooms, on other days. But on this day, the keycard records matched. The clause was real, and one man decided that the person who told him the truth was worth knowing, not because she had a title, but because she had the clarity to see what others missed and the courage to say it quietly, without flinching. Dignity isn't loud. It doesn't need an audience. It just needs to hold its shape when pressure tries to bend it. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you haven't subscribed yet, join us. There's always another story worth telling.